Great, we're ready to go. I'm going to call to order the Monday, August 8th meeting of Electoral Area Services Committee. I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the unceded and traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. We have a couple of delegations to begin. The first one is from TELUS, Christine St. Laurent, Shay Draper, and Doug Anastos from TELUS presenting regarding Forbidden Plateau and TELUS investment for receipt. Moved and seconded. And I believe, Christine, I see you on Zoom. You can go ahead. Do you need to do any kind of screen sharing?
Yes, I do. Just give me 1 second, please, so I can do that.
Okay.
Would you be able to enable participant screen sharing?
Yeah, we're just doing the co-hosting. And does anyone else need to present from their laptop? No. So Christine, you should be co-host now.
And while she shares, maybe I'll do a brief introduction if that works.
Please go ahead.
Perfect. So I just want to start off by thanking the regional district for the opportunity to present. For those that haven't met me before, my name's Shay Draper. I'm the general manager with TELUS for Vancouver Island, and really have two different roles. One is I have the privilege to support the residential technicians and local field managers that support all customers across Vancouver Island for residential service. And the second side is I'm really the single point of contact for communities, customers, really regional districts and municipalities within the region. And that can be anything from supporting fires and floods to escalations to connectivity requests. I'm joined by two of my colleagues today. And so we have Christine St. Laurent. She's part of our rural connectivity and local municipal government relations team. And then we have Doug Anastos, who lives in your backyard, but is also part of our wireless team. And so what we were planning to present today was really three topics. We're going to bring together really investment going on in your regional district from both a wireless side, which Doug will present on, as well as a wired or a pure fiber side, which Christine will add a bit of more color to that. And then I'll close it out with just giving a bit of an update around some of the community giving programs that we have in place, as I always think that's good to bring awareness to this group as you continue to socialize and engage in the community. So I'll pass it to Christina. I'll let her kick off.
Thanks so much, Shay. And thank you very much to CBRD for the opportunity to be here today and for the support to speak about some exciting news we have for your area. The province of BC has made a commitment that in partnership with the Government of Canada and telecommunications providers, they are committed to connecting all underserved communities in BC by the end of 2027. So this means that by the end of 2027, all communities in BC will have access to high-speed connectivity with speeds that meet at least the universal service objective of 50 megabytes upload and 10 megabytes download speed. So while making this commitment, they've acknowledged that this will be delivered through a mix of technologies that are currently accessible and appropriate for the diverse geography and regions across BC. So the primary focus in this commitment will be to deliver on the speeds of at least 50/10 over the course of the next 5 years. And that will be through utilizing whatever technology is most feasible given the geography within that specific timeline. So that could be whether through wired technology, such as fiber line, copper, coax cable, fixed wireless or mobility solutions, and in very remote areas, other technologies such as satellite will be considered for government subsidized funding. As part of the province's connectivity co-funding program, we're very pleased to be here this morning to announce that TELUS and the Government of BC are co-investing over $4 million to connect approximately 670 homes and businesses to the Pure Fiber network in Forbidden Plateau headquarters area. With this investment, homes and businesses will have the option to be connected to TELUS's Pure Fiber network, which is a direct 100% fiber optic internet connection directly to the home. This means that fiber optic, it never degrades and it's a symmetric service. That means that it's fast, always consistent, and the symmetrical aspect means it provides two-way services. So it's the same upload and the exact same download speeds. And the services here, the services start around 750 megabytes and go up to about 2.5 gigabytes. So much higher than the universal service objective. Specifically, the project that we have today that we are announcing will complement TELUS's existing pure fiber services in Comox, Cumberland, Courtenay, and Mount Washington. So we're here to say thank you very much for the support of TELUS's application to the government of BC to bring pure fiber services to Forbidden Plateau. And our especially thanks to Director Grieve, who's been such a major proponent and champion of this project. In terms of the timeline for the Forbidden Plateau headquarters area, the engineering and design of the network takes place this year. So you'll likely see some TELUS trucks in the area that are going to be assessing it. And the majority of the build will take place next summer. And we expect to have services up and running by the end of next year. So for Christmas time, services will be available. In terms of how you'll know it's ready, our marketing teams track progress and will issue a letter for each neighborhood once services are expected to be online. There's absolutely no obligation to sign up for the services, but if residents are interested, we send them a letter and then they're able to schedule an installation, consultation, and hookup services. So Shay's team will be the ones that are leading the installation services. And just one last thing before I turn it over to my colleague Doug to speak about some mobility investments. Director Grieve, I know that one outstanding question you'd had about communicating this project, and we had communicated this initially through an in-camera session. We're now pleased to say that we've signed the statement of work, and while the province of BC will not be issuing a press release until the build is complete at the end of 2023, the CVRD is now very freely able to speak about this project with residents. Doug, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everybody. Doug Anastas here, and I work for the wireless team, as Shay had mentioned. And also, I do live in Courtenay, so I'm a local member of the community and very much familiar with some of the, I guess you could say, some of the service challenges and also the topography and just the the lay of the land here. We thought it would be a good idea. We wanted to just provide a comprehensive update of everything that TELUS has planned in the Valley. And that includes both wireline and wireless. And so what I have here on the screen is a series of cell sites that TELUS is either proposing or has recently completed. And I can just provide a quick overview of each one. But at a high level, what we're finding is that, and you may have noticed this, I certainly have over the last couple of years, is I think with changing user patterns and also the growth of the community, the wireless network really needs to grow as well. And so there's certainly some issues with the wireless network that we'd like to fix, and then there's some what I would call long-standing areas where there's been poor coverage that I think everyone is fairly familiar with. If you're traveling around the Valley and you drop a call here or there. And so what we have here is really a comprehensive view of what it would take to really improve cell service throughout the Comox Valley. I guess I'll start from the north just to note, we up by Robinson Lake there, we just recently completed and placed a cell site on air, and that's now operational, and that's noted there by the green marker. There's another green marker there moving to, south from there, and that's over by Seal Bay Park. So that one was built last year as well. So some early progress there. We have south of there, another cell site by Little River, that I think everyone would probably know. If you ever go to the ferry terminal, certainly you drop a call. It's a very, it's an area that has essentially no cell service. Sorry. Okay, there we go. I'm losing my voice there. And I have another slide. I'll just speak to that one quickly as well under the regional district policy. So yeah, I'll just quickly touch on this one here. So, and I believe this is on the agenda for later in the meeting as well. Basically, this is one that staff is going to be presenting some additional information on. We're ready to start the consultation process, but essentially, what you see here is a monopole structure. It's a sort of a slim cylindrical cell tower, and we found a location for it on a large 80-acre lot that's set back from other residences and also from Eleanor Road. And you can sort of get a sense of that with the some of the map there and also the photo simulation. It's I think it's true. This would be very difficult to see if you're passing by on the road or also from neighboring residences. And the idea here is that this is this cell site would improve cell service to this area, and also with all of our cell sites, it would have the ability of providing high-speed internet access to people's homes. And so this in the Little River area, this would fix things there, and it's as with all cell sites, it's quite minimal in terms of what's required on the land itself. 15 by 15 meter tower compound, and we're also tying into some existing access and distribution lines as well, just to lessen the impact of the structure. So more of that one to come. It's sort of really just a heads up right now, and then there'll be a full robust consultation process shortly throughout the fall. Christine, if we could just maybe go back, I'll just touch on one or two more in the previous slide. So that's Little River. Moving south from there, we do have an active proposal in the Dove Creek area, and I did want to pause on that quickly because it does overlap with what Christine was mentioning before with the fiber plans in that area. And it's so basically at the end of the day, if the regional district board would like for TELUS to proceed with that, and if we gain land use concurrence for that cell site, really what we'd be looking at is going from a current state of very poor and unreliable connectivity in that area to full fiber and cell service. And so that still is required even with the fiber plans, and that's still an active application with the regional district that we'll continue along with. And finally, the two southern markers, I just wanted to note that as well. So there's a few water towers that are owned by CVRD that we're discussing with staff, in terms of potentially installing some wireless equipment on those water towers to try to make use of existing infrastructure. So essentially, in sum, all of our plans involve CVRD, all of our wireless plans, in some way, and we look forward to moving forward and improving cell service throughout the valley. Thank you.
Thought I would close out just on community investment in some of the programs we have, and I can tell you, at TELUS, we do believe in giving where we live, and so I thought I would just profile three different components that I think are very topical when it comes to coming out of a pandemic, and also highlight maybe some of the changes that have taken place, and then how this the information can be used within the community. So maybe just to start, historically, we've really leveraged the local team members we have in every part of Vancouver Island, and the retirees, which we call ambassadors, to really be the eyes, ears, and really the individuals that are donating time towards, I would say, causes that were meaningful to the community. And that looked like, just volunteering for whatever events there were, but also advocating for potentially different organizations that were in need of support. And so over the course since 2000, we've been able to donate 55,000 or volunteer 55,000 hours and donate $325,000 towards these types of organizations right in your Comox Valley. What's changed, I would say, as we've walked through the pandemic is we've now actually expanded, and we have a community board that operates not just in Victoria, but across Vancouver Island, where any registered charity can actually put in a formal application, and they can receive up to $20,000 in funding per year. And altogether, it's about $500,000 that we allocate across the region, so across Vancouver Island per year. And I think what's exciting about it is there's obviously a community board that determines where the funding goes to, but more than 50% of that is non-TELUS team members. So it's really people within the community that understand the challenges and some of the needs, and they really are the ones advocating and helping to determine where the funding goes. And so I bring this up just if you come across any organization that is looking for funding and they're registered, they can simply go to our website and they can put in a request. And we, as I said, on a quarterly basis, we'll review those and then we'll allocate. And the goal is really to make sure that we cover off causes that are having an impact in our region. So not outside of the region, but in the region. If we fast forward to the next slide, the other thing I just call out is obviously we're a service provider. We've certainly seen what the impacts of people that don't have access to technology are. And so these are really our Connecting for Good programs that really take the services we traditionally provide in all communities. And we really look to be able to either have a lower cost option or to be able to have education for people to understand how they can actually use the internet safely. And these programs themselves are intended to obviously cover off different vulnerable groups within the community. And so I would call out probably the two most common ones we talk about is Internet for Good and Mobility for Good. Both of these provide lower cost options for people to be able to get both a cell phone or a computer along with their service. And they started out as having a scope that was very focused on youth, but we really saw across the pandemic that, seniors, that Indigenous women, there was all these groups that really needed to be able to have access. And so we've expanded our services. And again, what we'll do after this, after presenting this, is we'll share a email that summarizes all of these. Again, I just find that they commonly can be circulated throughout the community, areas where people may not have awareness of this, and then we can encourage those people to be able to apply and have access to these programs, so that they can again have the technology or access to technology that's so important for just health, well-being, and really a sense of community. So with that, we thought we would pause and then maybe just see if there's any specific questions on what we presented, or even on anything we didn't present, and we'll do our best to be able to answer.
Sure. Thank you so much. I see Director Grieve has a question. And hold on, sorry, the panel's just gonna power down. You'll have to come over here, Director Grieve, and use my, hold on. Okay, try that.
There you go. We have connectivity in our boardroom.
Perfect.
Oh, I just want to take a moment to thank you guys for coming and presenting. Certainly good news for the Dove Creek, Plateau Road, Piercy Road area, to be sure. And talking to my friendly neighborhood TELUS guy that happened to be up a pole when I was getting my mail, he also says that there's plans of bringing it out to Coleman Road area, Left Road, and out that way as well in the near future. Apparently that's, but in the next couple of years, it's going to pretty well be right across the valley. Is that correct?
So what I would say is that the wonderful things about these programs and projects is they allow us to be able to bring infrastructure to areas that currently don't have that, and that allow us to, if you think about it as puzzle pieces, you oftentimes, as you start to build out, you can go and try to connect the next puzzle piece, and because you've had investment, it becomes from a return or from a cost perspective, it becomes more palatable to be able to do that. And so I can't comment to say everything's going to be connected. What I can tell you is we're really looking at how does this build help us as we move forward, be able to further expand into rural areas that would have been difficult to do without this type of investment. But if you have any specifics around like, hey, we would really like to know when is connectivity coming to this community or neighborhood, you can certainly funnel that into myself, and then we can look at, is there anything currently planned? And then we can also use that to help us look at setting priorities for the years ahead.
Well, you did mention the funding from the province of BC. So is every one of these builds dependent on further funding opportunities?
Yes, Shay, I can take that one. That's exactly what it is. So
Yeah.
Okay.
with this one here, because we've had this first agreement with the province of BC, it then enables us to then build upon those. So once we've delivered it in 2023, it provides the backbone infrastructure so we're then able to apply for the other services. Specifically though, in the communities, it is for those who do not currently have access to 50/10 speeds. If a community already has access, well, then they're not front of the line in terms of the timing. There are still plans for them, but in terms of getting access to government funding, it has to be for those that are considered classically underserved connectivity communities. But by 2027.
Yeah, 2027. Okay. So anyway, I guess the not to rain on this wonderful parade we're enjoying right now, but with regard to the proceeding with public consultation over the cell tower in the Dove Creek area, I know you brushed on that. Is there any plans of moving forward with a consultation process in the near future? Is that something that may be put off for a while?
Yeah, I can speak to that, Director Grieve. And I think just to answer your question, yes, we would like to proceed with the public consultation process. And the next step there would be an in-person meeting, public meeting. And so we've done a number of different activities, over the past year or so. There was, notifying neighboring residences, a virtual meeting, and then this would be the next step. And so we'd like to start to plan for that, likely in, I suppose, September, October at this point.
Yeah, I suggest November. Thank you.
Sure.
I see Director Arver has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for coming. And it's nice to see the two divisions, the wireless and the wired, come together as well. And I like that your last slide was a big thank you, because in a way, I know I sit on the board of the Federation of Canadian Municipality, and that organization has been lobbying the federal government for 10 or 15 years to connect rural Canada. And so when I see the thank you from TELUS, in a way, it's good because, correct me if I'm wrong, but projects like this one benefit from close to 90% of the funding comes from the federal government, and the infrastructure is owned by the companies in the end. So that is a cause for thank you. Those projects would not happen. And I think TELUS and other corporations benefit quite well from that public funding, which feeds the bulk of those projects. I do have a question on the wireless side, which is, I saw the two towers in the south, and I know there's been issues around, yes, Little River, that's great you're covering that, but I know on the highway, the inland highway, as we approach the Comox Valley and coming down the connector in Cumberland Road, there's significant drops there. And I think that affects many businesses a lot. Those are heavily used stretch of road. So I'm wondering if the little tower that was proposed would offer a solution for that area that I would describe probably between on the inland highway between Union Bay and almost the Punt Ledge before it picks up again, and then coming down the connector and Cumberland Road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for your question. I can speak to that as well. And I'm very familiar with what you're talking about. I know that it's almost like right when you turn the bend there at the visitor center going toward the highway, that's where it just magically springs to life and your phone works again when you have that line of sight to the tower that we have up on the highway there. And so that is another issue. It's one that we're aware of, and the upgrades that I mentioned should help improve that. It's they're going to be a bit closer to the to sort of the Puntledge Park area of Courtenay, which is quite there's certainly some issues with cell service down there, and I think the way that we're looking at it is that there's you saw a lot of markers on the map that represents a lot of investment, and that is all actual TELUS investment, and that would be sort of the first phase, and we'll see what the state of the network looks like at that point. And then if further targeted upgrades are required, we can always take a look at that But I certainly know exactly what you're talking about, and our team does as well. I've brought that to their attention, and they're very much aware as well.
That's awesome. Thank you. And just one last one is I do want to say the same thing as Dr. Grieve, that it's really great to have all of you today, and I'd recommend almost a once a year like that, whether like we're heading into election. We don't know if we'll be here next time you come, but I think a once a year in this format with wireless and addressing the whole valley is a wonderful way to engage effectively with the community from a big picture status, rather than to come once in a while with specific applications that are typically controversial. I think it's good to get the overall systemic view for the Comox Valley. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Trevor. And I just had a question. And first of all, I'll echo the thank you for coming and presenting. It is really nice to see where wireless and where wired is going across the community. I had a question around the Eleanor Tower, but will you be presenting when it's further on in the agenda? Are you sticking around, or?
I could. I hadn't planned to, but certainly can.
Okay, why don't I ask
address it
you
now.
the question now? Just because I noticed on the community, trying to get out to the community, and that the location for the community outreach was at the Merville Hall. And I would suggest that, for Little River area, that the Merville Hall is probably not a great location for people to go. And if you could find another location, either at the high school, at Highland, Airport Elementary, there are a few churches in the area too. And, if none of those work out, 40 Knots Winery also has a great meeting room. Something closer to the community, so you don't have to travel quite as far on the other side of the region. I don't know if you will get great turnout if you host a meeting at Merville Hall. So if that can be arranged, I think that would make a huge difference in getting people out.
Thank you. Yeah, that's good feedback, and I know what you mean when you say that. I think partly our thinking was to try to combine that with the excuse me, the Dove Creek proposal, and have a broader session. But yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's a bit far for people to be expected to travel to participate. So yeah, we can certainly look into that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Director Graves I've sparked a question for him.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just wondered if the chair would be open to possibly varying the agenda and bringing forward number 6 after we vote on receipt, so we can keep them online.
Do you want to go before the next delegation or after second?
Well, it shouldn't take too long. It's just for receipt as well, correct? So if you have any questions and we need to, use the great brain trust we have before us right now, that I think maybe we could just bring forward number 6. I don't think it'll take too long, and I'm sure that Sean would be able to wait a few more minutes.
Okay.
He's zooming in.
Good here.
I live here. You sure do.
Okay. All right. I don't see any questions though on the delegation though. So we'll vote on receipt of the delegation. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And so we have a proposal to vary the agenda to moved and seconded. Any questions on that? Okay. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we have item number 6, the telecommunication antenna system for Eleanor Road for receipt. Seconded, moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Dylan Thiessen, planner, will be introducing the staff report. Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks, Dylan.
Thanks very much, James, for that introduction. Through the chair to the directors, a proposal has been received by staff from TELUS Communications about their intent to construct a 43-meter tall monopole telecommunications tower on the property at 1388 Eleanor Road. Subject property is 32 hectares in size and is zoned RU ALR as it's in the Agricultural Land Reserve. Per the recently adopted Board Policy P89, the Telecommunication Antenna System Application and Consultation Process Policy, the first step is for staff to draft a report to the directors in order to introduce the proposal prior to the commencement of any public engagement, just avoiding situations of constituents and residents reaching out where the directors may not even be aware of a proposal. Staff have ensured preliminary consistency with the board policy as well as with associated amendments to the planning procedures and fees bylaw, which is outlined in the report, and the public engagement is set to begin relatively shortly. This will involve presentations to the Electoral Area B and Agricultural Advisory Planning Commissions, as well as a public information meeting for affected residents of the neighborhood. The public information meeting will be advertised in 2 issues of the Comox Valley Record, and letters with information about the proposal and a meeting will be sent to all property owners and tenants within a 500-meter radius of the subject property, which is again in keeping with the new policy, as well as the fees and procedures bylaw, which we follow for other planning applications like variances and rezoning applications. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as well from a staff or planning department perspective, and grateful for Doug and his colleagues to remain on the line if you have any further questions as well.
Great, thanks. Director Arbor has a question.
More of a comment. This is just for receipt, but I think this will be a good test of our new policy to see if it helps smoothen the process for the neighborhoods and the applicant, in this case, TELUS, and ourselves. If we cast our mind back to a year ago, our big stressor in this room was not Saratoga, it was the Dove Creek Cell Tower project. So as things ebb and flow, yeah, I'm hopeful that this policy will bring more awareness to the project and also give a greater sense of that the input from the community is provided in a way that feels satisfactory to everybody. So I'm actually excited to see how this one goes. And I guess if for staff, maybe let's look along that process if there's adjustment, because when you unleash a policy, sometimes you may want to make amendments or adjustments afterwards. So maybe let's keep tabs of the things that might not go perfectly as well. So yeah, that's great. And just like TELUS said, I think everybody knows in Little River, it's poor reception. At the ferry terminal, things might improve a bit because I think BC Ferries is putting Wi-Fi. We just started getting it on Hornby and Denman, and now you can do Wi-Fi calling and those different things. So there's different ways, but I think from a general perspective, having cell service in that whole area, including for emergency reasons, is quite critical. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't see the directors have any other questions, but I would just like to reiterate, if a separate meeting can be done for that tower specifically, you know, I think there are some other issues in the Dove Creek area that might bleed into unnecessarily into the Little River project. And I think they're 2 very separate projects. This one seems to be cited really well. And I wouldn't want some of the issues to kind of bleed over. So that's just a suggestion to you. Obviously, maybe a question to staff. We don't require to have separate meetings. I'm glad we're having a meeting, but if there are separate meetings, I guess the dates may have to be adjusted. Maybe over to Dylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You are correct. The policy requires that a public information meeting be hosted, but it doesn't really expand on what that might look like beyond being preferably in person, if possible. Staff have expressed a desire, though, to have separate meetings as well. Ultimately, it is up to TELUS, and they can show the results and justify their methodology there. But that's what staff has expressed as well.
Thanks. Director Gree?
Yeah, thanks very much, Madam Chair. A little history on of course, building anything that's close to the aerodrome at CFB Comox. We're talking about a 43-meter high to the top of the lightning rod. Obviously, that you are in discussion with the base around this. They made some of the residents in that area, or not in that area, on the coastal side of the airport, take down the tops of Douglas fir trees because it was protruding into their space. And it caused quite a kerfuffle around here when we couldn't get WestJet to land unless they could actually see the runway, and they needed a 500-meter, I think, to be able to land. So some of them turned around, went back to Calgary or Edmonton. So I know that that notoriously senior government departments don't necessarily talk to each other much. So I'm just hoping that you guys have cleared all those bases with Transport Canada and DND and all that.
I can speak to that through the chair, if you'd like.
Please.
Thank you. And just to back up, just to the previous recommendation for 2 meetings. Just to clarify, we can do 2 meetings, and we'll find an appropriate place for the Little River one, and then we'll have the Dove Creek meeting separately at a different time, but both probably in the fall. So we'll talk with staff about the best venue for both of those. Yeah, and as far as we're certainly very sensitive to the height of the tower and those considerations, being so close to the airport. And so that was really square one for us, was to talk to Transport Canada and DND and just make sure that that the height that we're proposing to the community is going to be acceptable, and it is basically pre-approved before we go to the community. And so that required a fair amount of analysis. We engaged a third party company to help us with that, and that's essentially how we arrived at that height as well in that location. So that's all been taken care of.
Great, thanks. Nods in the room. I don't see any other questions. On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much to the TELUS team for sticking around and answering those questions. We're going to go back up to our delegations, and we have a delegation from Sean Cole of Dragonfly Homes on the building permit process for receipt. Okay. Moved and seconded, and I'm going to turn it over to Sean. And I think you're unmuted, so you're ready to go.
Yep. Good morning. Thank you for the committee hearing me today. And thank you for the staff for due diligence in all past permitting applications that have gone through. I've been a contractor in the Comox Valley, working with some of the directors in front of us today over the last 30 years. So my construction experience in the valley dates back almost to high school. And over that period of time, the staffing in the Comox Valley Regional District has been amazing. And even to date, it is still, I don't have any staffing issues with what's going on there. I don't know if there has been a change in policy that has now immediately affected what is going on in the construction industry with the CVRD, or if there's been somehow a hole where our permits, I'm not inside of the system. All I did was request this meeting so that this committee can look forward into seeing where the problem lies in the permitting process in the CVRD, and if there was some way in the future to immediately fix the ongoing issues we're having with permits. So anybody that's not aware, standard permit application into the CVRD is in excess of 4 months now to be approved. And I'm talking a standard permit. I don't know why or what was going on. Past building directors that were involved in the CVRD, we had meetings 10 years ago where we were brought in as contractors, and we were guaranteed permits back to us within 2 weeks. That's obviously been changed now with new staffing or new regulations that's going on. One of my biggest concerns is a huge sweeping change in our new building code coming in December. And when that comes in, which is imminent a few months from now, there's going to be more involved in every permit come in. It's going to be a huge change to the contractors. We've been gearing up to this step 3 code book change now for about 4 to 5 years. When it comes in December, I just don't want to, I can't believe it takes as long as it does to get a standard permit. I realize that some permits involve environmental issues, some permits involve, but I'm talking about a standard permit on a standard lot. with no planning or environmental issues, no development permits, no other involvement outside of what I feel is the building department. We're talking about permits that involve pre-engineering, pre-surveying, I mean, we have 3 months worth of work that goes into a permit before we apply to the CVRD. Right now, I have 2 outstanding permits in the CVRD system that were applied for in early April. Still no rhyme or reason why those permits aren't back out to me yet. I have 2 staff members laid off right now, both of them under 30 with young families with kids under 3. The construction industry is at the mercy of the CVRD's inspection facilities. And the permits that I have, I've checked in on them fairly frequently, and they have been through the building inspectors area. They have been, I call it plan checked, and they are off to, I'm assuming, a planning department and or other staffing. So I'm feeling that maybe the holdup isn't actually in the building inspectors department. I'm beyond my information, but that is what I am leading to understand is what's going on with the system. I just think there needs to be a process of investigation into what's happening with our permits and why a registered contractor in BC who's applying for a new home, why the permits aren't turned back to us in 2 weeks. It just seems like there's no rhyme or reason for any extended timeline beyond that. And even right now, I don't know, it seems like there should be, maybe this board could look into an emergency triage of existing permits. I understand I am led to believe there's like 80 some permits out right now in the regional district waiting for approval. Possibly more. I'm not just going from word of mouth from other contractors that I realize they're inundated with permits, but that's not unlike any other summer. This is not highly unusual this year. I don't believe there's any major staffing issues in there. I'm still dealing with the same inspectors and planning department that I have for years. I realize there's been Dennis has gone now. There's a few changes in the team that's working there, and the team has been amazing over the years. This is not a reflection of the staff that's going on there. I'm not sure what the issue is and where it's going. I work with your staff in there every day, and their due diligence in their job is amazing. I want to reflect that this is not a reprimand, or I don't want to bring anything down on the staff that's there. I work with them every day to build houses for the community. The construction industry in the valley is one of our biggest assets. We need houses right now more than we've ever needed houses. I mean, the pricing on houses now is a direct reflection of the lack of housing that's available in the Comarch Belt. I think that's pushing up the pricing, which I feel has gone beyond belief, but that's another topic for discussion. But the triaging of permits that are on staff in there now, if they seem to come in on a certain date and then leave on following that date, but if permits that are coming in could be sent out that don't require investigation into environmental concerns and or other concerns in planning, I think that would sure speed along the construction industry. As an example, I think I put in my application for this meeting last month's building permits that were issued by the CVRD. I'm not sure exactly the total number of staffing that's involved in the CVRD building process, but I would estimate it's got to be $100,000 or $200,000 a month that goes into tax dollars into this committee. And we did 2 permits last month that were new home construction. On top of that, yes, they did 3 other permits, but for deck renovations and for slight alterations to existing buildings, which yes, those people should apply for a permit and have that that work done under a permit. I'm not wanting to avoid the permitting and or the inspectors guidance, but something needs to change in the CVRD's handling of the permits that are coming in there. Shutting down the construction industry in the valley is really a shame, and it affects so many people's livelihood. I don't have any software to share with you or any other information like that. That's my 30-year experience of what's going on in the industry right now. If there's any other comments from Director Grieve. I see Daniel Arbor, a director. I see that this week they actually, there was a news bulletin sent out to anybody looking to put in a permit, that the permits are now taking 4 months. That would have been great information 6 months ago. But anyway, that's...
Okay. Sean, are you open to questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So Director Arbor has one or comments?
Yeah, thanks for bringing the issue forward. And you're right, the CVRD did make an announcement a week, 2 or back, talking about the length that it was taking. And that is disheartening, I think, to us as it is to you and the construction industry, in the sense that I actually tested, I put on Facebook to my communities that you are coming to present today, and you're not alone in feeling like that it's unreasonable and that it's affecting the work. And it's very interesting for me, because I think I bring a very unique perspective to this board, in the sense that not half, but maybe half of the buildings in my constituency do not require a building permit at all. So on Hornby and Denman, we don't have building inspectors. We don't have building permits. We just have siding permits. And the reason why I think that has worked is because of something, that people say. There's already engineers and a lot of different people that apply their stamps and the rest of it. I think the Alliance Trust is trying to move towards building permit, but it hasn't happened yet on Hornby and Denman. So how is it that in British Columbia you can have something that takes 4 months on the one side, that is super labor intensive, that we review every single application, that we do site tours, and kudos to staff. During the COVID era, there were improvements. Like I think we did some offsite camera inspections, and we're trying to make it more efficient. But it seems like I don't disagree with you that the process itself seems to be pretty heavy. You mentioned the triage. That's one way. Another way would be to move, like many sectors, to an audit system. Do we need to follow every single application? Or would it be enough if we said that we're going to, just audit the process for 10 or 20% of the homes and see how the industry responds? Could we do away with building? What can be learned from Hornby and Denman? Is it a catastrophe over there? Are houses completely poorly built and a complete liability risk, and bylaws are being ignored? That's not my sense. So what I would like to propose, and I don't disagree that in the universe of the housing crisis and all the rest of that, we don't, I think our staff, elected officials, are all on board with trying to provide smooth development, friendly kind of environment. So what I'm thinking, if my colleagues support it, because right now we're just starting this conversation, and you started it, Mr. Cole, today. Maybe under new business, I could ask that we get good information from staff, because what's lacking here is a staff perspective. And maybe I would ask for a staff report that outlines the options, almost in an Elon Musk way, to say, if we want transformative action, building permits so that we don't tell people that's going to be 4 months for the next 2 years. What does that look like, right? And maybe they'll brainstorm some idea, or maybe they'll say there's very good reasons why we can't change anything. And then your guys' job is to go to the province or somewhere else, which often happens. So, and one last comment, Madam Chair, is I also appreciate that step 3 is coming in. We're already, and I'm part of that group of people that see step 3, step 4, step 5 as positive for society in the long term, but I also recognize that brings a whole new level of red tape and regulations and new practices that are required. So if we do that, you can't have it both ways. We can't keep our basic processes complicated and all the rest of that. I'm thinking of Germany, which has more of an outcomes-based approach in building codes and things like that. So, and then it's step 3 for the Valley and step 4 for Courtney. I think Courtney is moving to step 4. So yeah, no, we need to be proactive. I thank you for coming to present today and outlining the problem. And from what I heard since the agenda was published in my communities, is your sentiment is shared. So maybe I'll come back under new business if my colleagues support it.
Thanks, Director Arbor. Director Grieve? Yep, sorry.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And thank you, Sean, for being so respectful. As a full disclosure on this, I spent 35 years in the building industry, the building supply industry. I'm the guy that sold the hammer. I didn't have to actually use it, which I think was better of the two. But I think what's really lost here is the urgency of this. We're being polite. But really, when you think about it, I'm just coming from the other side of the counter and dealing with people we're building in the Comox Valley. It is a huge stress. It's probably the #1 most dangerous, precarious position you can put yourself in is when you have all your life savings tied up. And especially if you've already sold your home and you're expecting to start the other one, to find it delayed. I mean, right now, places like Mount Washington, as you probably know, it's already too late to start anything up there. So I think, quite often in government, and you've heard me say this before at the table, that we go down rabbit holes, spending precious staff resources doing things that really should be the purview of the province or the feds, more so the province. And sometimes the real core municipal services suffer. And I think that's what we got here. I mean, it's obvious, when, and not to slight anybody in the regional district, all our staff are great, but that sense of urgency, it's another day, you punch the clock. But it's not like that when you're out there doing it. You talk about laying off some of your workers. I mean, huge impacts. I know there's some other builders that approached us on the same issue. They've had to cancel some projects, and it's just huge. I mean, the ramifications of all this, the spin-offs of all this, is I think beyond what we are even talking about here right now, and even the social emotional part of it as well. So that's what I wanted to bring up. Hate to say it, but everybody knows about Stu Young in Langford, and they get their building permits in less than 2 weeks all the time. Now, he outsources a lot of stuff. I'm just wondering if that could be something we look into, talk about a triage. I mean, you're saying that, Sean, you're saying that you've got pre-engineered, pre-surveyed, ready to go. And,
yeah.
and you would think that an engineer's stamp would suffice. So you're saying you still have to go through the whole mill, even when you have all those important stamped engineered papers?
Yes, 100%. We always have to go through the entire process as if we were a homeowner building an addition of the deck onto the back of our house. There is no difference between a new home warranty certified builder's application that I take 3 months to prepare and someone's hand-drawn sketch of a 10 by 10 deck they want to put on the back of their house. I don't believe there is any difference in the two when it comes to the CBRD's acceptance of those permits. You mentioned Langford, but I was looking at other jurisdictions, and I believe right now their regional district of Nanaimo is in excess of 7 months. They have extreme staffing issues. They lost 4 or 5 of their inspectors down there. But then you look at Campbell River, and Campbell River has tried to fix the problem by, similar to Director Arbor's suggestion, they now offer a sitting permit. So what they will do before their staffing has to deal with the permit is it will go quickly through planning to make sure that the building is allowed on that property and meets all the planning requirements, which I think is still a huge hurdle, and that still needs to be in place. And then once that is done, the Regional District of Campbell River offers you a sitting permit, which then will get you an inspector to actually view footings. I've had footings set up on a site on the back road now for in excess of almost 2 months, waiting for my first inspection. And I won't pour concrete without an inspection. Even though I have an engineer and I could go ahead and do that, my project would then be red flagged. I would probably be given a stop work permit. I'd have to come in and pay the fine. But at the end of the day, I would still get a final for it because I have an engineer signing off on my footings. But I like to work, I try my due diligence to work within the system that's given to me.
Yeah, well, that is very encouraging, but I do think that we are dropping the ball here for you. And I don't think the urgency of this is really resonating around this table as much as it should. As I say, I mean, it's the number one biggest investment that people make is in their homes. And I do think that we have to actually get back to concentrating on core municipal services, and this definitely is one. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. Sean, you've raised a few questions about, you're not sure what's happening behind the scenes. And I really appreciate you coming today and telling us what your experiences have been. I just want to ask if staff would be able to respond to some of the items that Mr. Cole's brought forward.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Certainly the importance and urgency is not lost on staff. And this is something that we've been looking at and aware of the delays for a couple of months now. You mentioned triage a couple of times, and we've taken a look at all of those outstanding inspections and applications to identify which ones are ready to proceed through the process. I'm not a building inspector, so I don't have the in-depth knowledge of the processing, but we have looked at those that are able to advance, those that are sort of at more risk, I guess you could say, because of the timing around Mount Washington, for example. It's a very small construction window. We're aware of that. We're also very much aware of the amount of resources that are tied up into these different applications and construction projects. So very much aware of the importance and the pressure it is putting on either homeowners or developers. We have had, I don't want to make excuses, but we have had some staffing challenges. We've got several staff who are now putting in some overtime hours to help work through some of this backlog. We are identifying some other process improvements. So resources are being put to this situation to attempt to get ourselves out of the backlog situation that we're in, and then processing applications in a more efficient and a more effective manner. It's not something that will immediately correct itself overnight. This does take a bit of time. And so, Mr. Cole, I appreciate your bringing this forward to the committee's attention and for staff, and appreciate the decorum with which you're sharing your information. It does take a bit of time, and we will continue to put our resources toward this and find our way through it. I know that letters went out to a large number of the applications and applicants, just identifying where they're at within the process, and that's generated now more calls and more questions, and I think part of the frustration also is other industries and other professionals that developers and builders need to access they're all stretched in terms of their own resources. So there's a knock-on effect when there's a delay in one aspect, it can have a knock-on effect in other aspects. So none of this is trivial or simple, but I do want to say that we are working towards the resolution of this and looking for more improved processes in place to make the process more simple.
Thanks for that.
And Ton True is here, Manager of Planning Services. Whether Ton, you have anything to add at this point, or you're here for more questions if they come up.
Go ahead, Ton.
Thanks, James, through the Deputy CEO to Madam Chair and the directors. Yes, as you have heard through our annual budget presentation from our Manager of Building Service, there has been an increase in building permit applications, and we're all aware of that. Through COVID, people were less traveling, more applications. I'm also seeing that in planning too. We're seeing a lot of more applications and more technical and complex applications, which is taking more staff's time. In regards to an update on how much applications are in queue right now. As of today, we have around 120 applications that is in queue that needs to be reviewed. We have roughly around 20 new applications that we just received last week. So the applications are increasing. I have been meeting up with staff in the front who's taken in the applications. And we, as Sean and as the directors are aware, we are updating our websites. We're increasing our communications to the public, especially to their contractors and their homeowners too. We went out on social media just to provide that information. As staff, we're aware that there is some urgency to this, and I can reassure to this committee that staff is working hard. As James says, that some staff are rescheduling their vacations just to meet this demand, and we are aware. As I said, I am meeting up with staff weekly and every few days, just see if there's any changes and updates. Our issues that we're having right now with timing with building permits is not new just for us. It is happening in the regional districts in BC. So moving forward, we're hoping that we can resolve some of our issues. As James said, we will improve our process time. Speaking with the building inspectors, it's not the building inspecting component that is delaying it. It's their the timing is more to do with site plan review of to ensure that it complies to the zone bylaw. But also, we're receiving a lot of phone calls and emails, and staff is taking a lot of time answering these phone calls, and while there's better time in processing the application. So as I said, we're working on this, and we're hoping that things slowly changes. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Ton. I see that Director Arbor has a question too, but you've kind of twigged a question for me, because I know at this table we get to see some of the complicated building permits and some of the issues that have to come back to this table. And I'm wondering if you could describe, like, for example, if there suddenly, a neighbor complains and a stop work order has to be issued, does that take away from time that staff have to, basically review all these applications and get them through the process? Like, what kind of impact does some of those complications have on staff timing?
That's a great question, Madam Chair. So when we do receive a complaint for maybe a building that was not receive a application, we do have a process and a policy that we deal with. It has to be in writing, and it has to be by a complainant. So with that, we go through a process. We inform the owner and so forth. It does take some time, but it's not the building inspectors. They will go out and do a site inspection just to verify that this building was not didn't receive a permit. What's lagging the time is their plan check and review to ensure the application is complete, and to ensure that the zoning and all the building requirements is there. So in regards to your questions, is it taking more time for those complaints. It's not. It's the plan checking complaint.
Okay, so it's more the pre side of things rather than the after effects.
That's correct. And some of our applications are not fully complete. What we're seeing is there is a high demand in building permits. But what we're also seeing is some of the applications that we are receiving is not fully complete.
Right.
They're missing some information. So staff is spending more time in educating and informing the public about what we need.
Okay. All right. Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. So we're getting into a more substantive conversation, which is good. Another thing we looked at, I think last year, was to start moving some of those development variances and other things to not bring them before elected officials and to try to skip that process and leave more authority to staff. I don't know where that sits, whether we made those amendments or not. We've had so many things going on in the last 8 months that one escapes me where we left it. But I think, I hear what our deputy CEO is saying, but there's also a background where elected officials for the last 2 years have felt like our planning is under capacity. We've been trying to hire a senior manager for a long time. We've been, and apparently we're not unique. But I understand that the status quo is to just say, let's work harder and hopefully the number of applications come down a bit as interest rate, who knows, right? I understand why staff would say that, let's just work harder and we just need to figure it out and plug through and make minor adjustment. But I want to go back to that transformative talk because I think Mr. Cole has a point too, is as an elected official, I guess we wouldn't want to see things get worse and get to 7 months. So this is where at the policy level, so yes, you're operating in a process environment, but staff is likely more aware than we are of policy things that we could, like Director Grieve mentioned, Langford. Okay, Langford might be too permissive or whatnot, or maybe Allen stress or whatever. But if they're finding ways to make it work, have we looked at summer students outsourcing, bringing in temporary retired planners? I don't know, right? I don't know what our department has or hasn't looked at because they may feel constrained by policies that over the years our board has imposed on them in terms of how you deal with things. What would be great for us as elected officials is to know some of those policy constraints, if they exist, if there are things that could knock down the 4 months to 2 months, if you could hire, I don't know if you can go outside the union and hire people. Like there's just a lot of things that we don't really have a handle on and for you. So, but ahead of step 3, that's the big risk that I see, and the big question is if we continue with this path, and then you add step 3, and then the building inspection that has gone well so far also starts to trip up, then you're dealing with, like, we're becoming, a really inefficient kind of system, probably not just here, across the province. So after on the new business, this is what I'm proposing, and just to plant the seed now. So in the context, that would be a motion for new business. In the context of moving to the implementations of step 3 code and current challenges in the building permitting process, that staff present a report at the next ESC meeting on options to rapidly provide building permits, for example, to under 1 month, or other alternatives, including triaging, auditing, and doing away with building permits altogether. So that would be what I would table at under new business. I'm just planting it here in case later on people have comments or feedback.
Okay, thanks. And Sean, maybe one last question for you. You mentioned, that in previous times there were meetings within the building community and our staff. And I'm just wondering if that has continued to happen. Do you have times where the building community comes together? And is that something that might be helpful moving forward as we do go to step 3?
Our meetings within our community have almost ceased in the last 3 years due to COVID implications. Before that, we had home warranty committees in town that we had meetings basically every month. Those are still happening, but the amount of contractors that are attending is very few.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's understandable. We are still in the midst of COVID too. Okay, but maybe something moving forward too is more information sessions for staff to meet with the building community and keep them appraised of what's happening. And maybe that may be something to add to your motion, Director Arbor, later on. Okay. I don't see any other lights on it.
If I could add one more thing, I really like Campbell River's approach to the sitting permit. It gets me pouring concrete within a month or something of applying for a permit, and then the permit will be then issued. If planning does their job and it's a pre-engineered building, then technically I wouldn't even need an inspection. All I would want is approval to pour concrete.
Okay.
At that point, it's like Campbell River. You could be, the building could be basically up to roof on before I would need an inspection.
Okay. All right. Maybe something to add also to Director Arbor's list of potential solutions. So I want to thank you for your delegation. I'm going to ask that we make a motion to approve the delegation. We have the motion. So all in favor then? Opposed? And that's carried. So thank you very much, Mr. Cole. Maybe we'll just take a 5-minute stretch break and then we'll move on. So we'll get into the development permits in 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, I'm going to call the meeting back to order as Director Harper leaves. Okay. We have a couple of sets of Planning Commission meeting minutes to, sorry, the management report, yes. So we have the management report from August 2022 for receipt. Move, and I can second. Are there any questions on the items on the management report? I don't hear Director Arbor from the backside. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And now we can go to the Advisory Planning Commission minutes for Area C and the Agriculture Advisory Planning Commission. Both are moved, and I can second. Comments or questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Next item up is Electoral Area C Development Variance Permit for Seaview Road for receipt. Moved and seconded. Over to staff.
Thank you very much. And please introduce Dylan Thiessen, planner for this the staff report. Yeah, Dylan.
Great, thanks, Dylan.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to the directors, staff have received a development variance permit application to reduce the front yard setback for a proposed carport from 4.5 meters to 3.5 meters. The subject property is approximately 0.27 hectares in size. It is zoned residential 1 and is designated as being within a rural settlement area. The applicant is proposing to construct a carport that will measure approximately 7.5 by 4.5 meters with a 3.5 meter setback for the front yard lot line. The setback for the eaves of the structure would be approximately 3 meters. An important reason for minimum front yard setbacks, of course, is to maintain sightlines, which improve vehicular and pedestrian safety. The minimum setbacks more generally also help prevent privacy issues to and from neighboring properties from arising. They ensure that a structure can be maintained without needing to go off property and ensure that development remains within a consistent forming character for an existing neighborhood. The Advisory Planning Commission for Electoral Area C voted to support the variance request, as the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure has issued a permit for the structure, for the encroachment of the structure rather, which is required when you're proposing to build within 4.5 meters of a road right of way. They also voted to support the variance as there's a significant grassy area within the road right of way, separating the road itself from the property line. Staff also sent letters notifying residents within a 100-meter radius of the subject property, informing them of the variance request and soliciting feedback. We received 1 email correspondence which was supportive of the variance. Staff are recommending that the variance be approved as the 3.5 meter setback still maintains a reasonable setback between the structure and the lot line. The ministry, as mentioned, has approved the encroachment towards the roadway, and it is not likely to alter the forming character of the development, increase privacy issues, or make the structure more difficult to maintain. Unfortunately, the owner of the property has a 9 to 5 Monday to Friday job, so is not able to attend the meeting today, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you. Do directors have any questions? I don't see any. And we have some course. Do we move the receipt before we move correspondence? Okay, okay. And we had that correspondence as well. Right, so if they're without any questions, then why don't we move receipt? All in favor? Opposed, that's carried, and correspondence has been moved and seconded. Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And were there any additional comments? Right, I don't see anyone in the room. There's no one on, is there anyone online who'd like to speak to this application? No, okay. Then we'll move on to the recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation.
Recommendation has been moved and seconded. Comments? All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 3, Electoral Area C, Farnham Road for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and pleased to introduce Brian Chow, Planner 2, who will be introducing this subdivision proposal within the ALR.
Great, thanks,
Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Through the Deputy CEO to the Chair and Committee. So on last month, on July 11th, 2022, the Electoral Area Services Committee reviewed a 2-lot subdivision application with an ARR for the property at 6751 Farnham Road. This subdivision proposal was made under Section 514 of the Local Government Act, which is subdivision to provide residence for a relative. The subject property is a 10.3 hectare lot. The applicant proposes to subdivide the property into 2 lots. The proposed lot and the remainder lots are approximately 2.29 hectares and 8.01 hectares respectively. Prior to last month's meeting, the applicant submitted additional information to the committee for consideration, and the additional information included a farm plan. The EASC recommended that a referral be made to go back to the Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission and regional agrologist. The farm plan for the proposed subdivided property of 2.29 hectares is to have 0.5 hectares for residential and agricultural buildings, being a barn. The remaining approximately 1.7 hectares will be divided into 7 sections of 0.25 hectares for Christmas tree plantation. Each section will be cleared each year, and each section will yield approximately 550 to 600 trees, and they will be sold to the public as a U-cut Christmas tree operation. The Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission met on July 21st, 2022, and they commented that while the proposed farm plan looked good, it was hard to justify subdivision when there was not an operational farm. ARR use regulation allows second residences on ARR lands, so it would set a dangerous precedent in increasing residential density enabled by subdivisions. The regional agrologist responded and they did not support the proposed subdivision, which was the same comment received earlier. The latest comments from the regional agrologist included that the additional information lacks components of a traditional farm plan, and they provided provincial resources on what a farm plan should look like. They also commented that the ARR use regulation allows additional residents in the ARR, and the applicant may construct an additional residence and implement the proposed farm plan without the need for subdivision. They have data to show that smaller lots are less likely to be farmed than larger parcels, so they're concerned that the subdivided parcel may be used as a real residential lot. Based on CVRD's policies and comments from the Agricultural Advisory Planning Commission and regional agrologists, planning staff suggests that this farm plan could be initiated without subdivision. In fact, this subdivision at this time may hinder future growth of a successful farm, making subdivision inconsistent with Section 5810 of the OCP, which is discourage reduction of and/or area for viable farm operation. So therefore, staff recommends that this ARR subdivision application be refused and not to forward to the ALC for consideration. I noticed that the applicant was in attendance on Zoom. I don't know if he's still around. His name is Andy Flynn. Oh, so he left the meeting. Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that report. Do the directors have any questions of staff? Okay, and do we have any other correspondence? Oh, sorry, Director Grief, go ahead.
Just quickly, yeah. I was present at the Agriculture Advisory Panel, and it was quite a long discussion. Obviously we support 514 as much as we possibly can, but in this instance, it was really felt that until they actually get their Christmas tree farm going up and running, that maybe is something they could visit later. It would take about probably half a dozen to a dozen years before they're going to be harvesting trees on it. So, but it was acknowledged that it's very difficult for family members to be able to get any financing unless they actually own the title, and but in this instance, it was decided to turn them down. So.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't see any other questions then. On receipt, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried. And then the recommendation is to not refer the application to the ALC. Moved, and I can second. Yeah, any comments on that? No, I just want to thank the APC and our regional grologist for providing those comments. I think that was really helpful and gave us some time to consider. We know that these types of applications to bring family onto land are that we understand. But in this case, as Director Grieve mentioned, the fact that it wasn't a working farm, that some of these ideas were not really proven yet, I think it really bodes us that we need to see a bit of evidence of activity before we go into this direction. So all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 4, ALC, Agricultural Land Reserve non-adhering residential use for Ham Road for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Ton True, our Manager of Planning Services, will introduce this staff report. Ton.
Great, thanks, Ton.
Thanks, James. Through Madam Chair and directors, on the line or through their internet there, we have their owner, Fred Donestein, is here to answer any of your questions. But first of all, I would just provide a quick summary of their application. In this proposal, the owners are seeking to place a double-wide manufactured home on ALR property that already has a house located on it. The regulations allow for additional dwelling, but restricts the size to 90 square meters or 960 square feet. A double-wide manufactured home is 160 square meters. Therefore, the application is necessary. For this ALR application, the board has option of forwarding the application to the ALC with comments and recommendation, or alternatively refuse the application. The Agricultural Advisory Plan Commission reviewed the proposal and recommends supporting the application. A referral was sent to the regional agrologist at the Ministry of Agriculture and Foods. Their response states, this application appears to be beneficial for agriculture in both short and long term. The Fisher Premium Plan policies on additional dwelling direct that consideration be given to a few factors, including where the dwelling will be located and impact on long-term agriculture potential. Staff believes that the proposed siting of the dwelling is consistent with official community plan policy. Madam Chair, staff recommends the forwarding the application to the ALC.
Great, thank you. And I see Fred's on the line. Did you have anything to add to the presentation?
No, I'm here actually. Well, good morning to the board. Just to answer if there's any other further questions. But one thing maybe that I would suggest that, and because I submitted a secondary letter, I don't know, just with a little bit more detail as requested, but just to state that the position of our request for placing that second dwelling is because for location to the existing driveway, there is a well already there, and it would provide a little bit of privacy for my nephew that is a full-time employee and part of our business. That would help satisfy part of our succession planning. And I also forgot to mention that in the last round that we are about to break ground on another almost $2 million project for a barn for our young stock. So that just shows our commitment to our business and agriculture. So unless there's any other questions, that's just what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Directors, do you have any questions of the applicant or of staff? Director Grieve?
Just to assure Fred that nobody can doubt the Doberstein's dedication to farming. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Edwin.
Yeah, and I'll second that. Thank you for bringing this forward, and really happy to see you've got a new generation of young people that are wanting to invest in your farm and make the commitment to keeping the farm going forward. I think the comments of the Agricultural Advisory Committee just underlay that as well. And so this is very different, I think, from the previous application that we had. So I don't see any other questions around the table. So thank you to Fred and thanks to staff. On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And we have a recommendation to forward this. Moved, and I can second that we forward this application to the Agricultural Land Reserve for the non-adhering residential use. Okay. And any other comments on that? All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thanks, Fred, and good luck with the ALC.
Yes, thank you for your time. Okay.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Item number 5, development permit area review, official community plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for receipt. I can moved and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to introduce Robin Holmes, Manager of Long Range Planning and Sustainability, to introduce the staff report.
Great, thanks.
Robin.
When you're ready, Robin, just press your button.
Good morning, and through the CEO to the chair and directors, staff are here this morning with proposed amendments to revise a selection of the development permit areas contained in the rural Comox Valley OCP. This review is in response to direction from the COVID-19 response and renewal plan to streamline the application process, enhance readability, reflect new case law, legal requirements, and improve enforceability. To implement the proposed changes, 2 amendments are required to both the OCP and the zoning bylaw. The review prioritized 4 out of the 10 DPAs designated in electoral areas, which are for the protection of the natural environment and development from hazardous conditions, as these are the DPAs that are triggered the most often. Sorry, I should have already announced that. As you know, the development permit area is an important planning tool and is used to designate areas and specify special conditions for additional protection or development control. The LGA provides local governments with this authority to establish these DPAs for a variety of purposes. I'll just go over them quickly because I'm sure you're very familiar with them. But they are to protect the natural environment, to protect development from hazardous conditions, to guide the form and character of development, to promote energy and water conservation, and to promote the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. This DPA review consisted of a comprehensive review, which was a scan of local governments' planning frameworks to identify best practices. The existing DPAs that we have in our OCP have been authored at different times over the last 15 plus years, and it has been since 2014 since the last changes were made, and that was when the OCP was adopted. Since then, planning staff have had lots of opportunity to process applications, identifying what works and what doesn't, or what could be improved upon. So staff have consulted with internal CBRD departments. This would include planning, bylaw, parks and engineering, as well as consulting with qualified professionals in the field. And through this process, we were able to undertake peer reviews of the more technical DPAs. And this included the freshwater, the nest tree, and the steep slopes DPAs. And this was able to highlight areas that could be improved upon to ensure that we were meeting or exceeding best practices in those fields. So what changed, or what has been changed? In order to respond to the key objectives, which were to introduce this consistent DPA scheme and to improve the ease of interpretation and implementation, we were able to accomplish this by introducing this consistent theme, which clearly identifies the DPA, where it applies, the types of environment that would trigger a permit, the objectives, special conditions, and justify the designation and the guidelines. And so we were able to do this by having this clearly established scheme that is now in place for all 4 of those DPAs. The DPAs were revised to reflect consistent language, wording, and this is to really help with interpretation and implementation by applicants, by planners, and as well by the qualified professionals that would be providing reports responding to these DPAs. Exemptions have now been included in each DPA, and this is really to allow a more tailored specific exemptions that respond specifically to the justification for that DPA. And this in turn streamlines the application processing. Applicants will now easily know whether they are in or out of the DPA, and they will easily understand what is required of them before proceeding with development works. So in terms of the other two key objectives, which were to easily amend the DPA guidelines to respond to best practices and update new legislation, and as well as enhancing enforceability by expanding the existing enforcement tools. And we tried to accomplish this by relocating the guidelines to the zoning bylaw. By doing this, this allows enforcement staff to utilize more available and cost-effective tools. And examples of these are using the provincial court prosecutions through the long form information and municipal ticketing information or a bylaw enforcement notice for more minor offenses. These tools will be utilized to achieve compliance and do not hinder the ability of the board to consider Supreme Court action for more serious offenses. And this reorganization also helps to achieve a more regular updates to the guidelines, because as being a part of the zoning bylaw, there are more regular amendments to the zoning bylaw for housekeeping items. And so this ensures that we are responding to those best practices as they emerge. And I would also like to mention that there were two other amendments that were included in this OCP amendment. The first is to the development approval information designation. Essentially, this included minor wording changes, but this will really enhance the effectiveness of the DPAs because it allows for when applications are being processed, it allows the information requirements to be able to essentially increases the ability for planners to request more information from the professional reports. So this really helps us to achieve our objectives with those DPAs. And then the second additional amendment is in response to expanding the area for consideration for TUPs. And this would be, sorry, going back. And this would essentially be changing the areas to include more areas. And that includes the settlement node areas, settlement expansion areas, rural settlement areas, and resource areas. And this is essentially just removing an unnecessary barrier for the issuance of TUPs. And so finally, in terms of next steps, if approved, staff will proceed with introduction and undertaking the external agency and First Nation referral, and also begin the public consultation initiatives. And once the referral process is complete, staff will bring back amendments for first and second reading. And if approved, staff will proceed with amendments to the CBRD ticketing bylaw to further support the enhanced enforceability. Thank you. And both Amanda and I are available for any questions.
Great, thank you. And we have a question from Director Arbor.
Thanks. Great you're bringing this today because it's leading to a huge argument between my right brain and my left brain. Because I'm thinking, my left brain is saying, yeah, good thing, DPAs for protecting all the different values. And my right brain is like, we just had a conversation around how the building permitting process and the rest of it is not doing too well. And I'm not sure that we'll have the capacity. So maybe that'll be the question of the staff is implementing this. How much more work will that add? And could that potentially affect the building permit timelines even further? So that's my first question anyways.
Amanda?
The deputy CAO to the chair, these DPAs are already in existence and they currently live in OCP. So the idea, we're hoping this actually streamlines in all aspects, whether it just be a straightforward planning application, someone wants to clear land in a DPA or do some work, but most certainly on the building end as well. Because now it's living in the zoning bylaw, it's one set, it's clear. I know on the enforcement end, not so much on the planning end, but where my brain currently sits is when we go out to someone who's done these works, they're not aware. They may have checked in the zoning bylaw. They're not aware they have to go in and into the OCP to dig into that. And it was pretty high level language in there. So having it now in the zoning bylaw, it will streamline. It shouldn't add any more time. These are already DPAs that we're all working with applicants currently. So now it's one clear set, one place, one set of bylaws for them to go through and for staff to explain. So it should assist in streamlining and not the opposite. That's our goal.
If I may let Ton comment as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's a great question, Director Arbor. So these DPs, the delegating power is through our general manager, so to staff. So these won't be going to the committee or the board. Their environmental DPs and steep slopes are approved by staff. For planning staff right now, it's roughly taking us between 1 to 2 months to process an application, a complete application. So timing wise, it doesn't delay anything any further.
Thanks. And I guess we haven't looked totally a little bit outside the box. So thank you. You're helping me kind of support what's being proposed today. But are we going to look at logging LPAs at some point? Because we don't seem to have still a lot of impact on the private forest land portion of things and protecting some of the values that we're trying to protect other private landowners in the valley. I know the Managed Forest Land Act prevents us from doing some of those things, but is there angles that we could potentially enhance the type of logging that we see in the areas?
Does anyone want to take a stab at that?
I do know that there is legislation that is geared towards the private managed forest lands. And there's extensive review at the provincial level now with input from our own water team, our engineering team, around the review of the PMFLA, Private Managed Forest Lands Act. And so I don't have much more specifics than that, but I don't know that local government from a DP perspective, as we have experience on our steep slopes and riparian areas, I don't know the local government has as much influence over those lands governed through the PMFLA. So unless staff have anything else to add to that particular piece, I think the focus for this particular report is the existing DPs that we have.
Sure. Maybe let me use a specific example. So we have the blue heron nest, right? So right now, we ask if there's a blue heron nest on the property or something like that, that the professional be brought and an assessment be done, right? So that's on private property, right? So this private property that owns all the forest lands, like how do we verify if there's a blue heron nest? Does our bylaw apply to that private land as well?
Tom, maybe have a
Through Madam Chair to Director Arbor, their nests, either an eagle's nest or a blue heron, is protected by the provincial act. So the province provides us with the authority to somehow protect them through our DPs. So it's not the birds, from my understanding, it's actually the tree, the nesting tree that's protected. The tree is, in the past, from my understanding, they are registered through the province. And if the trees are knocked down, that's when the province will go after the person who cuts down the trees.
So who checks eventually? Sorry, one last one. So who checks? Like for us, we are complaint based, basically. But if who's checking if a forest company knocked down a blue heron or a heron nest or something like that tree, and could a complaint be directed to us because it's under our jurisdiction?
Through Madam Chair to your Director Arbor, the only thing I can answer, the way to answer your question is for our jurisdiction. We have our IMAP system that provides us with a database of all the nesting sites in the Comox Valley. We assist the province while trying to update where all their active nests are, and we share information with each other. In regards to the crown lands or private management forests, I'm not too sure how they regulate that, but from my understanding, they are bound by the Wildlife Protection Act too. They have to ensure that they can't cut down trees within a certain distance of water course to a private landowner. So I can see that these trees are also could possibly be protected too.
I was just going to say that we can certainly get back to the directors on this question around the enforceability or enforcement of provincial regulation on PMFL lands and other crown lands.
Okay, and maybe Director Arbor, it is kind of going off the topic, but is this on this topic?
It is, Madam Chair, to the extent where I'm trying to determine whether those DPA applies to all private lands in the Comox Valley, or if the large corporations that own logging companies are exempt from our DPAs. And it appears that they are, because I can assure you that a ton of eagles' nests are being knocked down all the time in the massive clear cuts in Area A and C.
Okay, thank you. Maybe that's a letter to the province. Or Amanda, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm, because staff has worked closely with the province. We do get complaints of people working within eagle trees and within streams on Crown land and private managed forest. Our DPs do not apply, but any reports or complaints, or if the public or ourselves want to reach out, it is through Ministry of Environment, and they do go out. Staff has assisted in some instances to confirm that. They are private managed forest is still bound by provincial regulations around wildlife, and that's enforced through the province directly, not the local government level. It is enforced through the province.
Any other questions or comments on this report? Seeing none, on receipt then. Oh, sorry, Director Grieve, you had a.
Yeah, it's quite prescriptive. I'm glad it's going to go through process, and we have, second and third sets of eyes on it. I do think that quite often we set off with the best intent, and like what they say about unintended consequences, that we have to amend the amendment after the amendment. So it is pretty all inclusive. Just looking through it, with layman eyes here, but I am being reassured that this is a simplification. So we'll see how it goes through process. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Director Grieve. Yeah, I'll support it as well, because as you mentioned, as a layperson reading this, it seems like it would make things easier to have them all in one spot rather than one in the OCP and one in zoning. So let's see how it goes. All in favor of receipt then? Oh, sorry. Robin.
Through the chair, I just wanted to add to that we will be providing a consolidated version available to the public for ease of use. So it will be all in one place, but just for bylaw purposes, it will be in the OCP, and then the guidelines will be in the zoning bylaw. And that's really for legal purposes.
Sure. Okay, thank you. On receipt then, all in favor? Oppose? And that's carried. We have a recommendation. Moved and seconded. Any other comments? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. We've done item 6. We'll do number 7 prior to lunch. The Union Bay 3rd Street Water Project update for budget amendment for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I'm pleased to introduce Kaylee Lemert. Did you get that right? Yeah, Kaylee is our engineering analyst, and Kaylee will be introducing the staff report, and supported by Chris LaRose.
Great, thank you.
Kaylee.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to introduce our staff report. So as discussed in the previous staff report, developer of 5597 3rd Street, Union Bay, requested water connection in May of 2021. And shortly thereafter, staff determined that an extension of the existing water main to that property was not possible due to its construction and size. In fall of 2021, staff hired Coors and Associates to submit the design to the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure and Health in January 2022. In March of this year, Modi has identified some problematic aspects of the proposed design stemming from the road construction and limited road width, and asked for the entire road width to be repaved if the water main was constructed under the existing pavement. This unexpected requirement introduced several significant project risks that could significantly increase overall project cost. Over the past several months, CVRD staff, Coors, Modi have discussed possible solutions that could limit cost, construction risk, and on July 21st, the CVRD received conditional approval to proceed with the design solution. Coors provided an updated construction cost estimate, and with the 25% contingency to account for some additional unknowns, CVRD staff now anticipate the total project cost to be $164,000, requiring a budget amendment of $44,315.
Great. Do directors have any comments or questions on that? Director Arbor.
Yeah, thank you. I'm wondering if staff looked at the option to attribute, say, 50% to the Capital Works Reserve and 50% to the Community Works Funds, so that Union Bay can finally see some grant out of transferring to the regional district. So I would almost propose an amendment so that we split the cost between Capital Works and Community Works Funds.
Staff want to comment on the possibility of that? Chris?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. We hadn't considered it, but it would certainly help that service. This project has escalated significantly. It is a relatively small section of water main, just due to circumstances with the ministry and the size of that road. The costs have escalated pretty significantly, so this would be an excellent candidate for partial funding if that's supported by the committee.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, for years and years, in context, for years and years, we have really held back on spending Community Works funds in my Bain Sound communities in anticipation of the very large sewage project, which we hope will happen. But at some point, as I've said in the past, it's also good to put some money on the street when it's needed. We have access to those grants. I think Union Bay residents would be thrilled to see a little bit of grant money help out their dime on their water system, because there's other costs coming as well, I'm sure. And I think showing a little bit of grant contribution would be quite appropriate. So I would change the motion to do a 50-50 split between Capital Works and Community Works funds.
Okay, thanks. Do staff want to comment on the?
Just looking at Kevin Duville, whether or not the project would be eligible for one, and secondly around timing or any sort of other obligations we have to be mindful of.
Thank you very much. Through the chair to the directors. So yes, so currently as of March 31st for Area A Bay and Sound, there was uncommitted funds of about 1.4 million. So in theory, certainly is doable. I would have to obviously take a look at seeing what other obligations we do have at this point with respect to those funds, but given we are talking a relatively small amount, about $22,000, I would suggest that we can probably deal with that fairly easily.
Great, thank you. Dr. Grieve? Okay, great.
Question to Kevin, maybe. Is it even simpler if we do the full amount from Community Works funds? That way you don't have two transaction and two reporting, or it makes no difference in your world?
Again, through the chair to Director Arbor. So, I mean, if it's certainly the committee's direction to do that, we can certainly definitely take a look at that. And again, you know, given we are talking about $44,000, it should be doable and would be eligible, just to confirm that as well.
Okay, so I think I'll go for the full amount then. You're right. If it's not causing too much trouble.
That works for me. Are there any comments to staff on this report then? No. So then on receipt, all in favor? Opposed, that's carried unanimously. And then Director Arbor, you want to move a motion?
Yeah, thank you. I'll move that the 2022-2026 financial plan and expenditure program for the Union Bay Water Local Service Area be amended by increasing water infrastructure capital expenditures by 44,315 to support additional costs with the 3rd Street water main replacement, and further that the increase in capital expenditures be funded by corresponding transfer from the Community Works funds. Period.
So just that amendment of changing Capital Works Reserve to Community Works funds, and that's been moved. I can second. Director Grieve seconds. And Lisa, are you okay with the wording? Okay. Any other comments on that motion? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Thank you. Do you folks want to do another couple before lunch? Yeah. Okay. Langley Lake Salvage Salmon Relocation Trial for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to introduce Chris LaRose, Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, to introduce this staff report on Langley Lake.
Thanks.
Thank you, James, and through the chair. So this report is for information, providing an update to the committee on a trial, which will be undertaken this summer at the request of the local Stream Keepers Association, who have been working for years to rescue stranded salmonids from the Hart Creek system. So for the last 10 or 12 years, they've been doing so and transporting them down to a hatchery in Qualicum. That arrangement is no longer possible, you know, and they do try to keep the fish within their own stream system to allow that imprinting of the water. So the proposal was made to look at transporting those fish up into Langley Lake, where they would then spend the summer, while the lake level is so low that there is no typically outflows from the lake. And then once the rain starts in the fall, the level fills back up, and the water starts to spill again from the lake. Then the fish would then migrate out and go about their cycle. So there's a couple kind of areas of focus for the trial. We currently have stickleback only within that lake, no salmonids, and they do tend to get kind of sucked into the intake, which is just a fairly coarse screen in the lake, and then they end up stuck on the finer screen, which is at the inlet of the water treatment plant. So we'd like to see how, you know, is the same thing happening to the salmon fry in the lake? To what extent is that causing operational issues? Is it unacceptable mortality for the trial? There's also access kind of issues. We're also planning to work in parallel to try and just assess, you know, what if any long-term implications there might be to the water system from this collaboration. So our intention was to report back once we've completed our assessment. The stream keepers have kind of assessed theirs, and then report back to the committee with any recommended kind of path forward. So hopefully that would occur this winter.
Okay. Comments from directors, Director Arbor?
Thanks. That I did not expect an item like this, and that's pretty cool to see us involved at that level, working with the stream keepers and the FO around a problem that they're having, obviously with the salmon. And wouldn't it be brilliant if Langley Lake could actually, if the pilot or the test actually proved successful, and we could move on that basis. I love the idea of our water system also sustaining salmon, and perhaps over time, as the report says, we don't plan any adjustments for this year. But if there's hint of success, and if there's a hint that we could make improvements in our water treatment and system over the years, then that'd be a good news story all around over the coming decades. And it would probably also bring to light the importance of Langley Lake, not just from a human perspective, but also from other values that society cares about, and that might help other efforts that we have around Langley Lake. So I really appreciate staff kind of being willing to collaborate with those other organizations to make this happen. So I'm fully supportive.
Thanks. Just a question to staff, you know, I agree with that. You know, thanks for working with the stream keepers and DFO on this. I was just wondering if any other creeks nearby had been looked at as other potential place to put the salmon rather than to put them in Langley Lake first. Do you know if that assessment was done?
Yes. So my understanding is that they have exhausted all other options. And that they're in a real pinch this year. Hence one of the values of the trial, and that it allowed us to say yes immediately while we do the required assessment. Yeah. So yeah, in the absence of this option, it sounded like they didn't have any other options, so they would have had to accept the much higher mortality. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Director Green?
Well, maybe I'll have the answer. I'm not sure, but so they talk about stickleback, and of course they're everywhere. There must be cutthroat in that lake as well.
Not that I'm aware of. I think the stickleback are the only fish in that lake as far as we're aware.
Is that right? No bullheads? No, just stickleback. Well, this is a good news story. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Will we take a 20-minute lunch break then? Yeah, okay, so we'll be back at 20 after 12. Oh, there's more, there's more. Okay, thanks everyone.
Also, just confirm directors at the
Okay, thanks. I'm going to call the meeting back to order. The next item on the agenda is item number 9, the 2022-2026 financial plan amendment for the liquid waste management planning service function 340 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you very much. And Mark Rutten, our General Manager of Engineering Services, will present information on this staff report.
Thanks. Welcome, Mark.
Right, thank you. Through the CEO and through the chair, I've got a bit of a synopsis for this report. Unfortunately, Derry's not here today, so I'm going to handle this for her. The Sewer Extension South Addendum to the Comox Valley Sewer System Liquid Waste Management Plan has been initiated, and the Stage 2 Addendum report is targeted for submission to the province in October 2023. The liquid waste management planning process is a preferred planning process because it facilitates structured community, stakeholder, and technical input, resulting in a preferred option that better reflects the community's needs. However, it is more resource intensive. The Sewer Extension South Addendum will require extensive engagement efforts as well as additional environmental and engineering work to progress the project design, support the public engagement process, complete a stage 1 environmental impact study, and prepare the addendum report. The work will be funded in combination by the Liquid Waste Management Planning Service 340 and the Area A Feasibility Studies Service, Function 151. Staff have evaluated the resourcing requirements compared to the approved financial plans for these services. And while there is sufficient funds in the approved financial plan for Function 151, to complete this work, staff are recommending that some of the funding be provided by the 340 service through future expenditure reserves. Future expenditure reserves for 340 service are intended to be used to offset the cost of large planning projects like a liquid waste management plan. So during the financial planning process, staff recommended that 150,000 be transferred from reserves to operating in 2022 and used to fund project development for the Sewer Extension South project. However, these changes were inadvertently not included in the adopted financial plan. So given the significant amount of engineering work that has been completed in the first half of 2022 to support the project and the additional environmental engineering and communications resources now required to support the Sewer Extension South Addendum, staff are recommending an increase to the amount previously proposed. So the report recommends that 300,000 be transferred from reserves into operating in 2022 and used to fund continued project development work for Sewer Extension South and the LWMP addendum. If the committee chooses to approve this recommendation, the resulting reserve fund balance for the service will be projected to be about 300,000 at the end of 2022. So lots of numbers in the summary and in the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Director Arver.
Yeah, thanks. I think I feel comfortable with where we're at in regards to the moving ahead with the LWMP process. And I agree, it's a little more resource intensive to the depth of conversation, but not as extensive if the community hadn't already invested extraordinary amount of time over the last 20 years around understanding the options, understanding all those things. So this seems like a reasonable amount to move forward. I do have a question coming out of the gate. Did we have a few applicants for the pack for the South? Are we looking pretty good, or should we make another call to the community?
Yeah, we are discussing that item later in today's agenda.
Yeah.
And so but yes to both.
There's been interest. Okay.
There's been interest and we recommend, yes.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so hopefully Dr. Grieve and Amir are comfortable too, and we'll proceed for the next year.
Thanks, Director Arver. I don't see the other lights on. So on receipt, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We have a recommendation.
I'll move it.
Moved by Director Grieve, second by Director Arbor, to amend the 2022 budget year with a transfer from the future expenditure reserve to operating in the amount of 300,000 to support the sewer extension south project. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Right, item number 10, 2022 Denman Works Agreement for receipt. Moved and seconded.
Thank you. And Mark Harrison, our Acting General Manager of Community Services, will introduce both this report and the next report on the Hornby Island Resident Ratepayers Association Agreement. So Mark.
Great, thanks, Mark.
Thank you, James. To the chair. So we'd like to present first the Denman Works. It's a new service agreement for Denman Works Economic Enhancement Society for the provision of economic enhancement activities on Denman to support capacity building in the community. 3-year term with an option for renewal for 2 years at a cost of $50,000 per year. That is an increase of $5,000 over the last agreement per year. And that's really to help with further strategic planning. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
Robert?
Thanks. That I'm really happy to see that with that piece around strategic planning. They've done some good work over the years, but I think economic development can be so broad. It's good for an organization to put some attention to what they really want to focus on. And I want to give them kudos as well for their engagement with the Denman Bus Lounge the last couple of years. And I actually took the Denman bus last week with my son, and it was great. I actually took the community bus, so it's not quite the Zonia bus. It actually has a schedule, but it's a minivan. And then we went on some gravel roads and stuff, and buzzing around Denman. And I think it's well received in the community that service is there. And so Denman Works played a kind of incubating role as well in regards to that one. So happy to support the recommendation.
Thanks. It's good to hear that. And maybe just a question to staff. The new agreement is a slight bump in their budget from previous years. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, no, thanks for that through the chair. There is a $5,000 increase from last year from the last agreement, and that is to support the strategic planning. So it's $50,000 a year as opposed to 45.
Okay, great. I don't see any other questions on receipt. All in favor? Opposed, carried, and the recommendation moved, and I can second that 50,000 be adopted in the plan from function 555. Any other comments? All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Item number 11, Hornby Island Residents and Ratepayers Association Agreement for receipt. Moved and seconded, and I think we're going back to Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. I'd like to present a new service agreement for the Hornby Island Residents and Ratepayers Association for the provision of various services on Hornby Island, including solid waste management and recycling, fire department admin support, community hall, comfort stations, recreation services, invasive weed control, and emergency services planning. Currently, the CVRD in here are operating on a month-by-month basis based on the expired agreement, which expired in December 31st of 2021. This new agreement would be a 3-year contract with an additional 2-year extension. Total operating grants to be provided to here under this agreement are budgeted at $752,794,000, with the bulk of that going towards waste and recycling. Happy to answer any questions if you have any on the agreement.
Thanks. Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. So that looks pretty good. I mean, there was in February when we were in a bit of a panic around the future of parks, and at the time maybe waste management. We had said that by August we would come back with a report on the future of the relationship between CVRD and HIRA, and I guess the report is not a report, but it's a new agreement that's being proposed. So that tells me that things have gone fairly well and stabilized in regards to where we were at in February. We know there's been cost escalation in the services on Hornby, a little bit through unionization, which most residents see as a good thing. And I think, but basically my question to staff is reflecting on those 7 months, as there's, can you give us a flavor whether there has been thorough discussions around the future of servicing, whether Hira is feeling comfortable, whether we're comfortable? Obviously, if we have an agreement, that's probably the case, but any additional comments you may have around where we're at in February and how it has gone since with the transfer of parks to the CVRD?
Yeah, sure. Doug DeMarzo did the bulk of that negotiation. So I probably, if I could maybe kick that over to Kevin DeVille, who was also involved with the whole agreement process.
Thanks very much, through the chair to the directors. So yeah, I can certainly help support this conversation. So a number of CVRD staff did meet with Hira, as we do typically on an annual basis, save our COVID period. So we did, spend a number of hours with staff and the board from Hira this year, and did certainly speak to some of the issues that had arose earlier this year. They have provided us certainly some comfort that, certainly the insurance issues that they did encounter have been abated. However, we will obviously be continuing to dialogue with them to just ensure going forward that that continues to be the case. Outside of that, as Mark alluded to, there have been some changes in this current agreement. So we have extracted the delivery of parks services outside of this multi-service agreement. What we have added recently as well is the addition of some emergency planning supports with respect to emergency planning for Hornby Island. So that's now part of this agreement as well. Staff will be obviously continuing to look at overall service delivery, not only on Hornby, but to Andaman Islands as well. And if the need arises, certainly we'd be reporting back to this committee.
Thanks. Any other questions of staff? Seeing none. On receipt, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we have a recommendation. Moved and seconded by Director Grieve, the 3-year agreement with an additional 2-year extension between the CVRD and Hira move forward. Any other comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. So I believe we have a motion under new business from Director Arbor. Did you want to move something? Okay, sorry. So go ahead, Director Arbor.
Thank you. So going back to our discussion on building permits and the delegation we received, had a quick conversation at break with our deputy CEO, and I simplified the motion, which is always good. So what I have now is proposed in light of the permit challenges, not just at CVRD, but everywhere. So the motion would be that in the context of building permit challenges and the upcoming implementation of Step 3 code across BC, that staff prepare a briefing for the next ESC, which scopes out option to transformatively reduce building permitting timelines.
Could you provide a copy of that to Lisa?
Yeah.
Great. I can second that. Director Arbor, did you want to speak further to that motion, or
yeah,
pretty clear? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, it's part of the discussion with James too was, I'm not asking for a full report because that might actually exacerbate the problems in the building permit if we pull our building permit people to work on this big report. So I think what this would do is at least give, from an informed perspective at the staff level, what some of the big idea options could be for a board to consider at the policy level. if we wanted to be more like Langford at one side of the spectrum, or if we wanted to be more like RDN, like, and have more side, like, who knows, right? But just a scope out so that as step 3 is implemented, the next batch of elected officials don't find themselves in February, and then we're at 7 months in waiting times, right, for building permits. So I think, so hopefully staff supports that, the intent of the motion as well.
I just want to, and staff don't have to put a fulsome answer to this, but there were some other options that were presented by the delegation on sitting permits, and if staff might consider those as well in their consideration. Director Barber?
Yeah, I think so I left all that out because I'll rely on staff to look at it, because you could look at, I think what was suggesting was triaging, citing, doing away with building permits altogether, moving to an audit system rather than to, in terms of deciding even, rather than to enforce everything. So I think leaving it with staff to actually decide what is feasible, not feasible. I didn't want to tie their hands with the motion.
Okay, perfect. Any other comments, Director Grieve?
Well, yeah, I think what Mr. Cole brought forward about the Campbell River model, where you can actually, get to the point where you can actually start pouring concrete, but he called it a siting permit. I think in all other endeavors, we look to registered professionals. And I think this is no exception, that we should be able to accept outsourcing of some of the processes and and streamline it that way, because I'm sure that we don't have time. Staff doesn't have time to delve into this, too prescriptively until probably after the election season. But whatever we can do to expedite the outstanding permits that we are looking at, 120 applications. So it's just too easy, I think, to try to take it all on ourselves. So there must be some other model that whereby other registered acknowledged professional associations can sign off on some of the things that, and we already talked about using, taking pictures and sending in your pictures and what have you. Been using that through COVID. So I think the future lies there, rather than trying to do it the old way. So yeah, I'm going to support this.
Great. Thank you for that comment. I don't see any other questions. Sure, Director, sorry, James, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks. And staff can certainly take this resolution and look to prepare a briefing. I will say that the processes that we do have in place are built upon and structured around the regulations that have been established, either at this level or at other levels, and it's for this level of government to implement and adhere. So there's consequences to all sorts of actions, and that would have to be part of the committee and board's consideration as it goes forward in terms of whether it be status quo or change. But some of these considerations would have significant consequence as well. So just be mindful that the building inspection process, there's a tremendous liability that's associated with structures in that, and we would want to be very mindful of the consequences and the implications of change. So, but certainly we can look to prepare a briefing for the EASC.
Thank you. I'll make one comment too that I had a conversation with our deputy CAO during the break, just around the idea that Mr. Cole did mention the time it took previously, maybe 20 or 30 years ago. And one comment I made or asked was, are many of the builds now very complicated builds? Because the easy builds where we have cleared area, we're not coming up against a stream, those have all been done. And that there's very few simple builds that are left. And I think that's probably what's causing much of the the time that it's taking for permits to move forward. But I still think, the motion that's being put forward to ask staff to look at, what are the other potentials for streamlining, it's a good one. Okay, so on receipt then of that motion, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Staff have just asked us to take, a 2-minute break if that's possible. So we'll just stop, or we'll just do the muting, and I'm gonna just have a conversation.
So directors, one of the applicants for one of the reports that you considered earlier, Mr. Flynn, and the application is on Farnham Road. He was on the call earlier and then he dropped off, wasn't available for the discussion. That's the decision that the committee supported the staff recommendation, which was to refuse the application and not refer to the APC. This was the the ALC application. So Mr. Flynn was not available for that. He has since called staff. He would like to either share information or respond to questions or present information. And so if the committee would like, we can try to get him on the line, try to get him to call in and explain to him the decision here was made. However, if the committee wanted to listen to him and then change his decision at this point, it would be then a recommendation that would go forward to the board at the end of the month. So is that the intent of this committee to just try to get him on the line?
Yeah, thanks. I think it would be good. We do reconsider from time to time, and I understand sometimes technology drops, so I'm always for hearing from people. Yeah.
Here would be a better place than at the board. He could speak at the board, but I think it's better. We'll try and think that.
Your mic is on.
So then, just a question to staff, do we proceed with the in-camera motion or we wait till he gets on?
I would suggest probably waiting. I anticipate he's probably able to log on fairly quickly. And once we go in camera, we have to end the Zoom call. So another pause to the meeting, I suppose.
Sure. We can get refreshments on. We'll mute.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So the applicant, as I mentioned, we did try to reach out and we haven't heard back yet. So at this point, I would suggest that the board carry on, the EASC carry on with its agenda as planned. Yeah, the recommendation from this morning's EASC meeting will be considered by the board on August 30th. And for further consideration there, and staff will be in touch with the applicant around that.
Great, thank you. All right, then we'll move on. We have an in-camera recommendation under 91A, 91F, and 91I to go in camera of the community charter. Moved, seconded. Any other comments? All in favor?